Ouagadougou, a scorching May afternoon. The temperature had climbed past 42 degrees Celsius, but inside the presidential palace, things were about to get even hotter. President Ibrahim Traoré, only 35, was deep in a high-level infrastructure meeting, reviewing plans for a railway that could transform the nation's economy. Suddenly the doors burst open with a slam that echoed through the chamber. Yakuba Sawado, his chief communications advisor, stormed in, pale and breathless. "Mr. President, it's urgent. You need to see this. Ellen DeGeneres and General Langley, they just humiliated you on American national television." The room fell into stunned silence. Ibrahim calmly set down his pen. "Put it on the screen," he said quietly. All eyes turned to the tablet as the video began. Ellen was on stage, holding up a blown-up photo of Ibrahim in military dress. She doubled over in laughter. "Look at this. The president of Burkina Faso. He looks like a kid playing dress-up for a school play." The studio audience exploded with laughter. Then came General Langley, the retired U.S. military figure known for blunt, often brutal commentary. Arms crossed, smirking, he added, "Looks more like a boy general leading a toy army. I honestly thought this was a Halloween costume commercial." The American audience howled with laughter. But 6,000 miles away, in that quiet room in Ouagadougou, rage was building. Foreign Minister Alonso Ouedago slammed her palm on the table. "This is not just an insult to our president, it's a slap in the face of every Burkinabe." Ibrahim watched silently expressionless as the clip ended with Ellen and Langley mocking a military march, mimicking him. Then he rose, slowly, deliberately, his voice calm and icy. "Call an emergency meeting. If they want to play on the stage of global media, we will give them a performance they'll never forget." Within hours of the Ellen DeGeneres broadcast, the clip had exploded across the internet. It wasn't just the insult, it was the arrogance, the laughter, the ease with which a world leader from Africa had been reduced to a joke in front of millions. On social media, the hashtag #YariRespectBurkinaFaso began to trend. First in Ouagadougou, then across West Africa. By evening, it was among the top 5 hashtags on Twitter worldwide. University campuses in Burkina Faso were the first to erupt. Students poured into the streets with signs that read, "Our president, our pride. Ellen doesn't know us. Africa is not your punchline." Television stations replayed the Ellen segment, but now with commentary from outraged journalists and politicians. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Alonso Ouedago, appeared on national TV. What we witnessed was not comedy, it was condescension. It was the sound of Western arrogance laughing at the progress of a proud nation. In homes across the country, families sat in disbelief. Some were angry, others hurt, many simply confused as to how someone so distant, so powerful, could so casually humiliate their country's leader, and by extension their very identity. Back in the palace, President Ibrahim Traoré held a private debrief with his inner circle. Adjara Traoré, his wife, entered the room visibly shaken. "I saw it," she said, her voice tight. "How can someone with so much influence be so ignorant?" Ibrahim embraced her gently. She only exposed herself. "The world is watching now. We will not respond with rage, but with truth." As the uproar grew, real-world consequences began to take shape. The Minister of Economy, Fabien Sawado, entered the room with troubling data. 3 American investors have canceled next week's meetings. We're already seeing a dip in regional confidence. Their words have weight, even when meant as a joke. Ibrahim nodded solemnly. He stared at the screen where the clip of General Langley mocking his uniform was still paused. "This is not about a joke," he said, voice steady. "This is about perception. And perception, when left unchallenged, becomes truth." Outside, the protests grew louder. Support from across Africa began pouring in. Senegal's president tweeted, "Ellen DeGeneres has insulted not only Burkina Faso, but every African leader who dares to rise, young and unafraid." Ghana, Rwanda, Kenya Leaders from every corner of the continent joined in condemnation. But Ibrahim was not interested in outrage. He wasn't interested in viral hashtags or angry sound bites. He wanted something else. A moment of clarity passed over him. He turned to Yakuba. Prepare the communications team. This isn't just a response. This will be a message to the world, a lesson they will never forget. The next morning before sunrise, the presidential palace was buzzing with activity. Ibrahim Traoré had called for an emergency strategy session with his entire communications team, ministers, and digital media experts. The goal was not revenge, it was revelation. The meeting began with a clear statement. "We are not going to insult Ellen DeGeneres," Ibrahim said calmly. "We are going to educate her." And the world. Yakuba Sawado, seated beside him, opened a proposal for a professionally produced video studio, lights, scripted responses, presidential set design. But Ibrahim shook his head. No lights, no makeup, no studio. We don't want to look polished, we want to look real. The room fell quiet. He continued, "Let them see the Burkina Faso that Ellen laughed at. The schools, the hospitals, the innovation. Let them see the people who make this country strong. Let them see that we are not costumes, we are a future in motion." Fatimata Sawado, the Minister of Economy, chimed in. "We can include data growth numbers, investment trends, infrastructure stats, make it undeniable." Exactly, Ibrahim nodded. "But it has to come from the ground, from the streets, from the mouths of our people. Let them tell the world who we are." The plan was born. Over the next 48 hours, teams of camera operators, editors, and logistics experts were deployed across the country. The objective: capture the soul of Burkina Faso. The itinerary was aggressive. Ibrahim himself would tour key locations, rural hospitals, where maternal deaths had dropped by 2/3, technical schools where young programmers built apps for local agriculture, cotton factories that now exported to 23 countries. Ajara Traoré suggested including testimonials. Let ordinary citizens speak. Let a student say what education means to them. Let a farmer talk about clean water. No actor can compete with the truth. The campaign had one mission: truth through storytelling. Each segment of the video would begin with a quote from Ellen or General Lang Lei, followed by a powerful visual rebuttal. For example, Ellen's "He looks like a boy playing soldier" would cut directly to Ibrahim, inspecting solar fields, powering remote villages. General Lang Lei's "Toy Army" line would be followed by scenes of Burkina Faso troops training in peacekeeping operations for the UN. Every insult would become an opportunity to reveal reality. Ibrahim would narrate throughout, not in anger, but with clarity, humility, and purpose. "Let this be our moment," he said to the team. Not just to respond, but to redefine. Not just to speak back, but to lead forward. As the sun set that day, cameras were already rolling. Trucks moved out. Schedules were locked. What had started as a smear was now becoming something else: a story, a statement, a transformation. 3 days after Ellen DeGeneres and General Lang Lei had laughed before millions, something unprecedented happened. At exactly 9:00 a.m. GMT, a single tweet went live from the official Twitter account of the President of Burkina Faso. To Mrs. Ellen DeGeneres and to the world, let me show you the country you think you know. The real Burkina Faso attached was a 12-minute video. It didn't begin with music. It didn't begin with flashy graphics. It began in total silence. The screen faded from black to the calm, poised face of President Ibrahim Traoré, seated in his modest office. Behind him, a simple Burkina Faso flag fluttered in a soft breeze from an open window. He looked directly into the camera. "Mrs. DeGeneres," he said evenly, "I am the boy in costume you laughed at. Let me show you the world you tried to mock." And with that, the storm began. The video cut to Ibrahim stepping into a plain vehicle. No motorcade, no guards. Just him, a driver, and a cameraman. "You said I look like I'm playing house," his voice echoed. "Let me show you the house I work in every day. First stop, a hospital in the outskirts of Ouagadougou. The camera followed Ibrahim as he greeted doctors and nurses, pausing by a neonatal unit where premature infants lay in state-of-the-art incubators. This facility is one of 73 we have built in the last 3 years. Maternal mortality has dropped 67%. For some, this is just statistics. For us, it is survival. A midwife looked into the camera. I used to lose babies every week. Now I lose none. The camera then shifted fluid documentary style to a bustling technical school. In one classroom, students were programming drone navigation systems for agriculture. Others built software to optimize irrigation in dry zones. They laughed at my name, Ibrahim Traore, he continued. Said it sounded like a soap opera character. These students don't care what my name sounds like. They care that they have a future. A 19-year-old girl stood before the camera smiling proudly. Before I dreamed of escaping, now I dream of leading. Our president gave us that. The next cut, a sprawling cotton processing plant, the hum of machines loud and relentless. Men and women moved with precision, handling bales of raw cotton, feeding it into modern equipment. This factory alone employs over 3,000 people. We export to 23 countries, Ibrahim said. General Langley, you said I lead a toy army. These are the soldiers of our economy. Maybe it's time to trade your toys for reality. Suddenly the screen flashed white. A quote appeared. He should go back to school. Ellen DeGeneres. The next shot, Ibrahim walking through a local school, waving at children in crisp uniforms. Then a quiet voiceover. I did go back to school. I earned my MBA studying between midnight and 4:00 a.m. because my people cannot wait for my education. They need leadership now. Then came the moment no one expected. A drone shot soared over vast solar farms, powering entire villages. The music swelled for the first time, subtle, orchestral, emotional. 95% of our new energy comes from clean sources, Ibrahim said, standing before panels that gleamed under the West African sun. While some mock us, we power our future. The most powerful moment arrived without warning. In a modest village, Ibrahim sat at the dinner table of a local farming family. The mother, her eyes full of emotion, said softly, "We used to eat once a day. Now my children go to university." Ibrahim looked into the camera again. You see a joke, we see a journey, you see costumes, we see dignity, and then the knockout punch. The final shot zoomed slowly toward Ibrahim as he stood atop a construction site where a new highway was being laid. Trucks rumbled behind him. Workers cheered. "We are not asking for pity," he said, his voice rising. "We are not begging for validation. We are building, learning, growing. And when you laugh at us, it doesn't break us, it sharpens us." The final line. Mrs. DeGeneres, this is Burkina Faso. Not the one in your head, the one on the ground, the one rising. Black screen, one hashtag. In less than an hour, the video was on every continent. By noon, it had surpassed 5 million views. By sunset, it was trending in 72 countries. Comments flooded in. "This is how you answer ignorance with elegance." Ibrahim just taught a masterclass in dignity. Where can I invest in this country? Even celebrities began reacting. Oprah Winfrey tweeted, "This man turned mockery into a movement. Dignity will always defeat prejudice." TV hosts who once echoed Ellen's tone now scrambled to retract. A prominent NBC anchor declared on air, Ellen went too far. But President Traoré, he went higher. The pressure on Ellen DeGeneres became unbearable. Inside her Los Angeles studio, her producers stared at the numbers. Ibrahim's video had more engagement than any of her show's episodes in the last 2 years. One of her sponsors sent an ultimatum, "Distance yourself, or we pull out." That evening, Ellen sat in silence in her office, watching Ibrahim's video for the 3rd time. Each scene peeled back another layer of her ignorance. She whispered to herself, "I thought he was just a name. I didn't know he was a revolution." The ripple turned into a tidal wave. In the 24 hours after President Ibrahim Traoré's video dropped, the global media map was redrawn. Major outlets from New York to Nairobi, Paris to Pretoria scrambled to cover what they were now calling the most devastatingly graceful clapback in television history. News anchors, who had once smiled politely at Ellen's monologues, now shifted tones. CNN's lead segment opened with a talk show host mocked an African president and ended up teaching America what leadership really looks like. The clip of Ibrahim standing before the solar panels declaring, "We are not asking for pity. We are building," became an instant cultural moment, spliced, remixed, and echoed across TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Even teenagers who had never heard of Burkina Faso now quoted him in high school debate clubs. In Africa, he was a hero, not just for Burkina Faso, but for an entire continent long tired of being the punchline of Western media. Senegal's President Macky Sall tweeted, "Ellen DeGeneres mocked a boy. She awakened a giant." Ghana's Nana Akufo-Addo wrote, "President Traoré represents the face of a new Africa, educated, dignified, and unshakable." But the reaction wasn't just emotional, it was political, financial, cultural. In the corridors of power, leaders began re-evaluating how they spoke of Africa. And in Los Angeles, panic had taken root. Inside the glossy headquarters of the Ellen DeGeneres show, producers held an emergency meeting. The latest ratings showed a 23% drop overnight. Online petitions called for Ellen's sponsors to pull out. The clip of General Lang Lei laughing at the toy army was circulating with biting memes. Even Ellen's usual celebrity allies had gone quiet. Then came the first real blow. Oprah Winfrey, considered untouchable in Ellen's world, released a rare public statement. "It's not just what you say, it's what you don't bother to learn. Ibrahim Traoré is the kind of leader we need more of here and abroad." The tweet gained over 3 million likes. Soon after, American talk show host Trevor Noah aired a 5-minute commentary opening with "Let's talk about what happens when comedy punches down and meets someone with real power, poise, and purpose." He dissected Ellen and General Lang Lei's comments, line by line, then played Ibrahim's response unedited. The studio audience gave a standing ovation. By now, Ellen couldn't ignore it. She sat at her desk watching the metrics on a wall-mounted screen. Her team was silent. Then her executive producer whispered, "He flipped the narrative. You mocked him. He educated the world. That video has 83 million views in 36 hours. Ellen's face was pale. I didn't know," she murmured. "I didn't even Google him." Her agent leaned forward. "Then you need to say that, and say it publicly, before this buries you." Meanwhile, at the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim remained composed. He wasn't basking in victory. He was on the phone with African leaders, coordinating a broader media initiative to use this moment not just for Burkina Faso, but for the entire continent. His wife Ajara walked in holding her phone. "Ibrahim, CNN just called this the Mandela moment of our generation." He didn't smile. "Then let's make sure it's not just a moment." Behind the scenes, Ellen's team drafted a statement, but it wasn't enough. The audience was no longer asking for clarification. They wanted accountability. They wanted redemption. That evening, Ellen went live. The studio was stripped of laughter, music, and cheer. No monologue, no dancing, just silence. She stood center stage, hands clasped. "I have something important to say," she began, voice tight with emotion. "A few days ago, I mocked President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. I called him a boy. I laughed at his clothes, his youth, his name. I did it without knowing him, without researching his country, without understanding what I was mocking." The audience sat in stunned silence, and then I watched his video. Every second of it. She paused. And for the first time in a long time, I was ashamed of myself. Behind her, a screen displayed stills from Ibrahim's video, the hospitals, the schools, the solar farms. Ellen turned back to the camera. "President Traoré, if you are watching, I was wrong. Completely, painfully, ignorantly wrong. I apologize to you, your people, and to every viewer I've ever misled about Africa. Then she did something unprecedented. I am going to Burkina Faso. I'm going to meet the people I mocked. And I'm going to donate $1 million to educational programs across your country. The next day, the announcement dominated headlines. It wasn't just a PR move. It was a pivot in Western media's portrayal of Africa. BBC headline, Ellen humbled Africa. Answers with dignity. Al Jazeera, from insult to invitation. Burkina Faso rewrites the narrative. American universities joined the wave. Harvard, Stanford, and Yale announced open invitations to President Traoré to speak on leadership, humility, and international cooperation. At the White House, aides briefed President Joe Biden on the situation. His response, "We might want to follow this guy's playbook on diplomacy." And as Ellen prepared for her journey to Burkina Faso, American corporations began to take notice. Investment inquiries surged. Social media buzzed with interest in Burkina Faso tech, agriculture, and policy. The insult had sparked something powerful, something that spread beyond television and tweets. A shift in tone, a reawakening, an introduction to a continent on its own terms. 2 weeks after the world watched her humbled apology, Ellen DeGeneres stepped off a plane at Ouagadougou International Airport. It was her first visit to an African country ever. The sun beat down gently as she was welcomed by local dignitaries, media, and a crowd of curious onlookers. But the most striking image was the handshake. President Ibrahim Traoré stood at the bottom of the stairs, his posture upright, expression, calm hand extended. Ellen hesitated for just a second, then walked forward and took his hand. "Thank you for welcoming me, President Traoré," she said quietly. "I know I don't deserve this kindness." Ibrahim smiled, not with sarcasm or pride, but with dignity. Everyone deserves a second chance, especially when they're willing to learn. Over the next 3 days, the world watched Ellen DeGeneres embark on the most unexpected journey of her life, not as a celebrity, but as a student. Her first stop was the modern hospital featured in Ibrahim's viral video. There, she spoke with doctors, mothers, and administrators. She watched a successful emergency C-section and cried softly when a newborn was placed in a mother's arms. "I didn't know this kind of care existed here," she admitted to the cameras. "I didn't even know how shamefully little I knew." At the technical school, she met young Burkina Faso programmers, creating apps for local agriculture education and weather prediction. A 20-year-old named Musa showed her how his project had saved farmers 30% in irrigation costs. Ellen laughed in disbelief. "They're more advanced than some Silicon Valley firms I know." Then she grew quiet, and I mocked this. In a rural village, she sat at a dinner table with a farming family that had once lived on a single meal a day. Now their children were studying in university. "This is what real leadership does," the father said, his voice firm. "It puts food in our bowls and books in our children's hands." Ellen listened, no longer defending herself, no longer speaking, just learning. On her final day, she visited a cultural center where local artists preserved and taught traditional music, storytelling, and crafts. She watched a performance in awe, her camera crew speechless. As she stood amid paintings and sculptures, she turned to Ibrahim and whispered, "You have a wealth here that no country can measure." That evening, she joined the president at a press conference, broadcast live to both American and Burkina Faso audiences. She stood in front of the podium, no script in hand. When I first saw a photo of Ibrahim Traoré, I laughed, not because he was funny, but because I was ignorant. She paused, eyes welling, and then I saw his video, and I realized he's everything I claim to stand for: education, progress, hope. Then she made a historic announcement: "I am partnering with the government of Burkina Faso to create a permanent media initiative, one that highlights African innovation, leadership, and culture, and I'm moving my program here to Ouagadougou." The crowd gasped. She continued, "For too long we've let Hollywood define Africa as poverty and war. That ends now. I want to be part of the new narrative, a real one, led by Africans themselves. At that moment, something changed, not just in Ellen, but in the room, the country, and perhaps even the world. President Ibrahim Traoré took the stage beside her. "We are not defined by how others laugh at us," he said. "We are defined by how we respond." And this time we responded with clarity, humility, and strength. The two stood together, not as enemies, not even as friends, but as collaborators in truth. 3 months later, back in the U.S., Ellen's show had transformed entirely. Gone were the celebrity gossip segments. In their place were stories of African youth inventing AI tools, women leading tech firms in Lagos, and musicians blending tradition with modern activism. Ratings soared, sponsors returned, and her audience grew wider, more curious, more educated. She told CNN in an interview, "Turns out people want more than laughs. They want meaning, they want truth, and modern Africa delivers that in ways we've never even imagined." The special episode featuring President Traoré reached 18 million views in the US alone, making it the most watched in the show's history. But the deeper transformation was on the ground. In Burkina Faso, foreign investment surged. Over $2.3 billion in new commitments from American entrepreneurs flowed in within 3 months. Infrastructure deals, tech incubators, agricultural partnerships, all sparked by a single act of storytelling. Even more unexpectedly, American universities like Harvard and Stanford reached out seeking exchange programs with Burkinabe institutions. Ajara Ibrahim's wife entered his office one morning, holding a stack of proposals. "They want to learn from us," she said with a quiet smile. "And it started with you." A year after the viral video, Ibrahim was invited to speak at Harvard University, introduced by Ellen herself. The auditorium was packed with students, professors, and diplomats. A year ago, he began a television show, mocked a young African leader. Today, that same show is telling the story of a continent's rebirth. Ellen sat in the front row, eyes locked on him. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about what happens when we answer ignorance with dignity, when we replace mockery with education, when we stop shouting and start showing." He ended with a quote from his mother, "Ignorant people make noise. Wise people make a difference. I chose to make a difference." As the applause thundered, Ellen stood clapping, tears on her cheeks. And in that moment there were no jokes, no sarcasm, no audience cues, just a quiet understanding between two people, once adversaries, now allies, in a new vision of what media, politics, and humanity could become. He didn't just stand up for Burkina Faso, Ellen would say later. He stood up for the dignity of us all. Lessons from the story of President Ibrahim Traoré and Ellen DeGeneres. A 1,000-word reflection. The story of President Ibrahim Traoré's dignified response to public mockery is a profound lesson in leadership, media responsibility, and the power of narrative to reshape global perceptions. What began as a moment of ridicule transformed into a masterclass in communication, humility, and strength, a blueprint for leaders and communicators worldwide. At its core, this incident reminds us that perception can be weaponized, but it can also be reclaimed. When Ellen DeGeneres and retired U.S. General Lang Lei mocked President Traoré on American television, they weren't just mocking a man, they were mocking a continent. Their comments weren't merely tasteless. They were emblematic of a broader, long-standing issue, the casual dehumanization and dismissal of African dignity in Western media. Such depictions are not harmless. They reinforce damaging stereotypes, shape global bias, and affect international policy, diplomacy, and economic relationships. President Traoré's choice to respond, not with anger or retaliation, but with clarity, transparency, and purpose, teaches a critical lesson in emotional intelligence. He understood that reacting with outrage would only deepen the divide and distract from the real issue. Instead, he chose to educate his detractors and the global audience. His response was deliberate, strategic, and deeply human. In doing so, he modeled the kind of leadership that transcends borders, one that communicates not only through words, but through vision and values. A crucial takeaway from this episode is the importance of authenticity. Traoré rejected a polished media setup for his rebuttal. He chose raw, unscripted reality walking through hospitals, schools, factories, and farms. His decision to narrate his country's story through real people and tangible achievements created an emotional resonance that no scripted statement could match. It was not just a defense, it was an unveiling of Burkina Faso's progress, one that made the insult irrelevant by sheer contrast. This strategy highlights the immense power of storytelling and public diplomacy. The campaign launched by Traoré wasn't a publicity stunt, it was a reclamation of narrative. By allowing citizens to speak for themselves and pairing each insult with a visual counterpoint grounded in truth, he effectively dismantled the stereotypes perpetuated by Ellen's show. He didn't just protect his image, he reshaped the global image of his country. This is a lesson for nations and leaders everywhere in the digital age. Owning your story is essential for sovereignty. Another powerful lesson lies in the way this episode reshaped the idea of what constitutes strength in leadership. Too often, leadership is equated with dominance, loudness, or retaliation. Traoré demonstrated that true strength lies in composure, in resisting the impulse to mirror disrespect, and in elevating the conversation. His restraint was not weakness, it was strategic wisdom. He used a moment of humiliation to launch a broader campaign for dignity, effectively turning mockery into momentum. Moreover, this story sheds light on the global imbalance of media power and responsibility. Ellen DeGeneres, a globally influential figure, joked carelessly about a foreign leader without context or knowledge. This behavior underscores how easily influential Western media can propagate ignorance under the guise of comedy. The backlash Ellen faced, especially from African audiences and eventually from her own sponsors and peers, signals a turning point. The world is no longer tolerant of one-sided narratives and lazy stereotypes. Media must be held accountable not only for what they say, but also for what they fail to learn. Ellen's eventual transformation is another critical point of reflection. Her public apology and decision to visit Burkina Faso were not merely symbolic, they were acts of humility and growth. While the apology cannot erase the damage done, it demonstrates that individuals and institutions can change when confronted with truth. Her initiative to invest in education and reframe her media platform suggests that redemption is possible when paired with genuine action. For educators, politicians, and media professionals, the lesson is clear. Education is the antidote to ignorance, and exposure is the cure for prejudice. Ellen admitted that she had not even Googled Traoré before mocking him. That admission, while troubling, resonates widely. Too many assumptions are made about people, places, and cultures without effort to understand them. The story compels us to dig deeper, to question our biases, and to expand our worldview. There is also a geopolitical dimension to this narrative. The unified African response to Ellen's insult signals a rising continental consciousness, one that rejects condescension and demands respect. Leaders from across Africa rallied behind Traoré, not out of political convenience, but out of shared experience. Their solidarity sent a message to the world. Africa is watching, united and unafraid to demand dignity. This could mark the beginning of a new media and diplomatic era, where African nations proactively shape their international image rather than remain reactive to outside portrayal. The economic aftermath of Traoré's response is also telling. The surge in investment media attention and international academic interest following the viral video illustrates how narrative can impact real-world economics. Investors want stability, vision, and credibility, and Traoré demonstrated all three through his handling of the crisis. His video did not just change perceptions, it opened doors. Finally, the most profound lesson may be about the human spirit. This story is ultimately about redemption of a man, a country, and perhaps even a continent, long silenced in global conversations. It shows that leadership grounded in truth, compassion and courage can transcend borders and rewrite history. It reaffirms that dignity is not given by others, it is asserted by how we carry ourselves in the face of challenge. In conclusion, the story of Ibrahim Traoré's dignified response to mockery teaches us that leadership is about vision, not ego, that communication is about connection, not defense, and that truth, when told with clarity and humility, can change not only perceptions but destinies. It reminds us that moments of insult can become movements of insight. And perhaps most importantly, it shows that Africa is not waiting for recognition. It is building its own narrative, one story, one leader, one truth at a time. The world watched with mixed emotions as a story of humiliation was transformed into one of global inspiration. For many viewers across the world, what began as a segment of late-night mockery quickly evolved into an unforgettable lesson in leadership identity and justice. The comments that flooded social media news outlets and video platforms were not simply reactive, they were deeply reflective, expressing admiration, regret, and even a personal reckoning. Many viewers admitted they had never heard of President Ibrahim Traoré before the incident. Some confessed that they too might have laughed at the image, if shown out of context, not out of malice, but because they had unknowingly absorbed the condescending media portrayals of Africa, so often served by Western entertainment. The video response from Traoré challenged them not just emotionally, but intellectually. I realized how little I actually knew about Burkina Faso, one viewer wrote, and how much I assumed based on stereotypes. What stood out most to the global audience was the president's restraint. He didn't yell, he didn't insult, he didn't ask for sympathy. Instead, he stood tall in the face of ridicule and chose to lead by example. One viewer tweeted, "President Traoré could have responded with fire. Instead, he responded with light. That's what real power looks like." Others echoed the sentiment, marveling at his ability to remain composed, deliberate, and inclusive, even when the world seemed to laugh at him. For African viewers especially, the youth, the moment was both emotional and galvanizing. Social media overflowed with declarations of pride. Students in Senegal, Nigeria, South Africa, and beyond declared Traoré a symbol of the Africa they wanted to represent, strong, intelligent, unapologetic. He didn't just speak for Burkina Faso, one user commented. He spoke for all of us who have been overlooked, misrepresented, or dismissed. Many young Africans noted that for the first time they saw someone who understood the power of media and used it not for ego, but for empowerment. "We've had leaders who disappear when insulted," a Nigerian student wrote. "But here is one who faced the insult head-on and used it to teach the world who we really are." The sentiment was echoed across university forums and WhatsApp groups, where clips from the video became material for debate, inspiration, and even school assignments. In the West, the reaction was more introspective. Many Americans expressed shame and disappointment, not just in Ellen DeGeneres, but in their own ignorance. Viewers commented that they were moved to tears by the sincerity of the Burkina Faso people featured in the video. One post on Reddit read, "I used to think Africa was just what the news showed, conflict and poverty. This video showed me what the news never does, ambition, progress, and human dignity." Others focused on the contrast between comedy and consequence. The line between a joke and an insult, they said, had never been so clearly drawn. "It's easy to laugh from a distance," a Facebook user wrote. "But when the people you laugh at speak back, not with anger but with substance, you're forced to reevaluate everything." That reevaluation for many became a moment of transformation. There was also deep admiration for the video's structure. Viewers noted how each insult was met not with defensiveness, but with undeniable reality. When Ellen called him a boy playing